The Oklahoma Sooners have some good news coming in 2025 because they got a lot of guys returning. Where do they rank in SEC returning production? We'll discuss coming up next year on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Oklahoma Sooners are bringing back a lot, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But based on returning production, things are looking pretty promising on the offensive side of the ball, Jay.
Yeah, shout out to Dog Stats over there on the Xbird app. He's been putting together, he has a massive repository, Google Sheets that has all of the players' production he's been putting together in preparation for the Bill Connelly article that's about to drop. And we know once his article jumps in, ESPN will have all of the details about returning production. But, John, when I looked at this initial numbers and stuff, Oklahoma's returning like 178% in passing yards next season. But that's not the thing that jumped out to me the most. When I looked at the numbers for quality production that's returning, and the way he listed is PFF grades of 70 plus or a 4 or 5-star recruiting ranking, Oklahoma has 41 players in total coming, with 30 of them on the defensive side of the ball. And that's number one in the SEC. So it sounds like Oklahoma has a very good chance, barring injury, as we mentioned before, if we stay healthy, Oklahoma has a really good chance to make waves next season because they're bringing back a lot of players.
Yeah, I'm going to play a little bit of the devil's advocate here, Jay, and you can tell me why I'm wrong. But I think a lot of this is going to be boosted by guys that played at lower levels of competition last year and are making a jump. And so I'm excited about what Oklahoma has and what they brought in. And yet there's still a lot that needs to be proven on the field, because you got John Mateer going from playing Washington State schedule. Now you got to play one of the toughest schedules in the country, if not the toughest schedule in the country. You got Javonte Gibson, a talented player in his own right, but he's making a big jump, and he's going to factor into a lot of that returning production, those two guys, because they are bringing a lot of production with them to Oklahoma. Defensively, obviously, the returning production stands out, and you did not add, you added maybe one significant player on defense through the transfer portal and Kendall Daniels.
I'd say two. Kendall Daniels and Marvin Jones Jr.
Marvin Jones.
Both of those would probably be two significant pieces to add. But no,
forgive me.
Great point.
Forgive me about Marvin Jones Jr. That's going to be that's the dude I said was going to break out a few weeks ago. No, so those two guys, they've fit into a defense that has produced, and they've got talent, and they've shown a lot. On the offensive thing, it's a lot of what ifs still for me.
You're not wrong there, though, John, and I can't refute anything you're saying. The one thing that I will point out, though, and that kind of goes a little opposite of what you're saying here, goes with your devil's advocate play, which, playing on the opposite side, I guess the angel's advocate, we'll call it that. But returning receiving yards is only at 100%. So statistically, the receiving yards that we lost and come back in, we're about at the same number. So, the guys that we did lose, we lost some numbers, but not a lot.
Not
but
really.
We're returning 99.2% of our running yards from last season. That, to me, is a lot bigger in comparison. O-line snaps at 84%, based upon the statistics. Tackles, 88%. Returning pressures, 87%. Really, only one you really heard on interceptions is 77%, but that's because, Woody Washington's gone. You lost Billy Bowman, so Danny Stutzman, you got all those seniors you losing on defense, but truth be told, Des Malone, but truth be told, John, that 178% of the passing yards, what just makes it wild is just the fact that we're bringing in a quarterback that put up more yards by himself, regardless of the lower or higher. He put up more offensive yards than our entire offense did by itself combined. And that, to me, is still kind of something to consider. Plus, you're bringing in the double factor here. Quarterback, offensive coordinator, especially ones that's been together for 2 years. We saw what Cam Ward did when he left Ben Arbuckle and went down there to Miami. look like the same dude he looked like at Washington State. Ben Arbuckle knows how to coach it because he did it with Cam Ward. So all we need to do is get John Mateer to go out there and put up about 3/4 of that production. The defense will do most of the work. And we know the defense can do it because the defense did it all last year. So totally get your hesitance because it's fair. It's very fair. You didn't say anything that was unfair at all whatsoever. But I still got a lot of cautious optimism with this because the return of production, that's some nice numbers.
It just needs to fit together. It just all needs to come together. And
be healthy.
As optimistic as I can be, they've still got to prove it on the field. This is a team that, listen, the offense was bad. And going into 2025, kind of my thought process is it can't get any worse than what it was. I think it has the potential to get significantly better simply because you have a quarterback that has a mentality that I think is a little bit greater than what we had. He's an experienced player. He's not going to turn the ball over as frequently. He's a tough player. We've seen him play with physicality. I mean, that's not going to be a dude that's going to be rocked by, the SEC competition that he faces. Is it a step up in competition? 100%. But we saw it this last year. A guy like Diego Pavia, he can make that step up and still be successful.
Yeah.
So listen, I think that there's a lot of promise here, but when you start seeing all these returning production numbers come out, when it includes all the transfers that Oklahoma's bringing, and you're returning a lot of the offensive line snaps from an offensive line that was just kind of okay and maybe at times bad for much of the 2024 season, I can understand why people would be reluctant to be excited about all of that returning production, especially on the offensive line and at running back, when it really wasn't until the last half of the season that we started to see anything promising out of the run game, out of the running back room, out of the offensive line. And then even still, it was a roller coaster ride. Some of it because of your passing attack that just could never really get going. Some of it because your offensive line was down several starters throughout the entire season. But for whatever reason, or for whatever it is, it's going to be hard for me to be like, yeah, all that returning production is great, but I need to see it on the field. Again,
and that's fair.
And this is where I keep coming back to the Michigan game. If they go out and they put up a 30 spot on Michigan, win or lose that game, hopefully win it. But if they go put a 30 spot on Michigan, I'll feel great. Even shoot, they score 27 and they win that game, I'll feel really good about the direction of the offense.
And I totally agree with you there too. And that's a very good point. And I like the point that you pointed out, like with, Vanderbilt, right? So Vanderbilt brings in Tim Beck as the offensive coordinator, and then you bring in Diego Pavia as the quarterback. They were matched together at New Mexico State when they had that win at Auburn. And we talked about, the defensive coordinator, Nate Drelling, who was DC, held him to 10 points. But we talked about that. But Diego Pavia did that at New Mexico State, lower level. And his offensive coordinator joined him when they went to Vanderbilt. And so you kind of got a case study as to prove it. The question is, how much of a gamer is John Mateer? That is basically what we're trying to figure out. And if he's as much of a gamer he showed out against Washington in the, is it Apple Cup is what they call it up there? Yep. Yeah. He balled out in the Apple Cup and got the dub. And so if he brings that type of tenacity that he showed there into the SEC, I think we should be fine. Heck, that, Washington may not be the same fully with Jed Fish in the way he set up, but Jed Fish gave us problems, at Arizona and that Washington squad, when Kalen DeBoer was there, they gave SEC teams problems. And the Washington wasn't terrible in the Big Ten, which is a very comparable conference to the SEC.
A lot of things happened on Tuesday regarding Oklahoma. Senior Bowl stuff. Jim Knowles spoke. So many different things to discuss. We'll just touch on it coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.